Good afternoon. Normal people having a great time to change the world. Thank you. I'm Kermit Payne, and thank you for joining us for Biomedical Engineering and Health Professional Careers. STEM is multidisciplinary, and its related fields, especially engineering, are increasing in demand and are linked to the general shift towards everyday utilization of machine and technology in all aspects of life, and contribute to the development of life-saving concepts. Our first speaker, Dr. André Churchwell, is noted as a cardiologist, and he combines his clinical, administrative, and leadership skills as an influencer. Dr. Churchwell is the Chief Diversity Officer for Vanderbilt University Medical Center. He is the Senior Associate Dean for Diversity Affairs at Vanderbilt University School of Medicine. He's a professor of medicine and cardiology and a professor in radiology and radiological services, and also a professor in biomedical engineering. You can find more information about Dr. Churchwell in your digital program on page 29, or you can catch him on YouTube singing "Look Like a Silver Lining" with this lesson to make it shine on you. Welcome, Dr. Churchwell. Thank you.
Sure, I'm not muted. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you.
Great. Well, I really welcome the opportunity to chat here. I've actually talked, Dr. Juarez is someone you never say no to, and I've talked at other venues for her that are all about trying to build more African Americans in STEM. So I'm glad to be here. This is about engineering, and so I'm here to share what I call my life journey. And my life journey will give you some examples, hopefully, of how you can do things from different lenses, okay? That there's not just one way to get to a career in. And so I hope to walk you through my life and share my journey and to where I've come from East Nashville, here in Nashville, Tennessee, to here at Vanderbilt. I start off with my family. My parents, you got to start with who brought you to the dance. My parents have left me. My mom left us in February of this year, but boy, they were phenomenal. Choose your parents wisely is one of the things I would certainly recommend to all you all out there. They were committed to education. Dad was called the Jackie Robinson of Southern journalism, a writer, graduate of Fisk University, who knew I was interested in science and engineering, but spent his entire life teaching me how to write properly. I might add, it was until my 40th birthday, as I would send him my papers, scientific and others, that he finally quit putting red ink on the papers and said, "Andre, you can finally write. You are on your own now." And I was very thankful that he spent his time to mentor me. Another thing I heard earlier from the other speakers, you need to have mentors. And my parents were my mentors. My mom and dad were my life coach mentors, and I listened very much to his model life. Being from Nashville, we started in a little small home. This is the Churchwell home. It's probably no more than 2,000 square feet. There's 7 people live there, 2 adults and 5 children. I'll share some more of that in a minute. The largest room in the house was my dad's library. This is the den in his library. It's the only room in the house that had an air conditioning unit in the wall. So if you could do everything you wanted to do, but if you wanted to read and study, you'd have to come back there. And he would be very mindful about what you were reading. And he had a huge library of books that covered every major topic that you can imagine. And this was his wall of fame, he called it. If you succeeded in something, he would put you on the wall. So my brothers and I became physicians. So he had portraits made. So that's me with my brother Keith, and that's me on the other side of my brother, his twin Kevin. They're twin physicians. And they were interns at the time when I was a resident at Grady Memorial Hospital in Emory. You can see Dad meeting Muhammad Ali there and all kind of awards. And it was really a challenge for us to find a spot to put an award. So find someone that's going to challenge you, to daily challenge you, but love you at the same time. Next slide. One thing I would recommend, and I would hope that Dr. Juarez and others will send this to you. Find great mentors that will teach you and stay in your life. Willis Hearst was my great mentor in medicine and cardiology, the chair of medicine in Emory, and he shared everything. most of the time mentors only share what they do, like a research mentor or somebody that teaches you how to listen to the heart, like Dr. Hearst. But he shared everything, like his favorite statement about what it meant to be a professional man that was delivered by Albert Tuttle at Emory at the graduation ceremony in 1957. I won't read the whole thing, but I want you to listen to a couple of things. Do not debase yourself by equating your souls to what they will bring in the market. Do not be a miser, hoarding your talents and abilities and knowledge either among yourselves or in your dealings with your patients or clients. Rather be reckless and spendthrift. Pour out your talent to whom all it can be service. Throw it away, waste it, and in spending it, it will be increased. Do not keep a watchful eye lest you slip and give away a little bit of what you might have sowed. Don't censor your thoughts to gain a wide audience. Love people, give it all away, and in giving it away, it actually gains greater value. So that's the service of a professional man, a professional woman. It's in what you deliver, what you have, those values, your skills. You're going to make a good living, but don't hold anything back. Next slide. And this just kind of echoes, you can see it real close. If you're a professional person, you have no goods to sell, no land to till. Your asset is yourself. So what is the share of a man worth? If he does not contain the quality of integrity, he's worthless. If he does, he's priceless. The value is either nothing or infinite. So work on, issues around integrity, work on what you consider to be your life's goals, whether it be science, engineering, or medicine, or some combination like that. That was obviously my goal to be. Next slide. Next slide after that. So, I chose initially an engineering path through Vanderbilt. I was an engineering undergraduate in biomedical engineering, did research, but thought I could probably be both an engineer and a scientist or a biomedical engineer. So I went through training in medicine first. After I finished Vandy Engineering School, I went to Harvard Med School, from Harvard Med School to Emory in Atlanta, and spent 17 years there. I was an Emory resident, and these are some of my Emory buddies who came with me to create the cardiology program here at Vanderbilt. To the left is my younger brother, Keith, who you saw on the other slide. There he is with the big glasses on. And so one of the things about mentoring is I mentored my younger brothers. They saw my path in medicine, and so they followed me. I went to Vandy and then the Harvard Med School in Emory for training. Kevin to the left, Keith's twin, went to MIT for engineering education, Vandy Med School, and trained at Children's at Harvard. Keith, to your right, with the big saucer glasses, went to Harvard College, WashU Med School, and trained at Emory in cardiology. So follow great mentors. Listen to what their path is. Maybe their life story and path matches what you think yours should be, okay? Look at your skills. Are they math, science, art, design, or some combination of all that? Also, keep looking and exploring what your creativity is. I don't want you to think that you're just limited in one area. I'm going to share with you that you have creativity you need to explore because it will inform your science and your engineering and your math. This is the Churchwell family gathered, my dad and mom in the middle there, and they're the brothers. So that's seven folks that lived in that house. This is at my brother's wedding. Next slide. So as I was in Emory, I was fortunate enough at Grady to be the first Black chief resident at Grady Hospital. And so that offered me an opportunity for a whole year to teach all the residents and run that 1,100 bed hospital that many of you know about that sits in the middle of Atlanta. I saw all types of medical illnesses and varieties and shapes. And I spent a whole year there honing my medical skills because you got to be a good doctor first before you become a good biomedical engineering physician who's going to apply the medicine in science and engineering to solve medical problems. You got to understand the medical problems first. So this is just a quick tour of my year there at Grady. They spent the annual report. That's me coming through the front door a little bit skinnier at 6:20 in the morning to start teaching the residents. Next slide. That's me meeting them early in the morning as we gather for bad coffee to go over the cases that came in the hospital the night before at Grady. Next slide. That's me in the emergency room at Grady Hospital, listing the cases, deciding who gets admitted, teaching the residents. Next slide. That's Willis Hearst, my great mentor, cardiology mentor, with me in EKG rounds with the students, teaching the students about electrocardiograms. I spent 13 years learning from this man and learning, once again, not just medicine, but a life story. There I'm back in the emergency room in that one day, talking to the residents, trying to decide how to treat and manage these complex sick patients. Next slide. But I at the time I was there in medicine, I still had that engineering burning desire in design and applying engineering to medicine. So I worked with my colleagues, Joel Fellner to the left, cardiologist, and Ajit Yoganathan, a PhD in fluid mechanics and engineering, and my buddy Don Giddens, next slide, to build the Emory Georgia Tech Biomedical Research Center. So I was one of the key people. There was about 6 or 7 of us, both from Emory and Georgia Tech, that had the vision to build the Emory Georgia Tech Biomedical Engineering Research Center that many of you know about now, and that was in 1987. At this point in my training, I was so excited about going back and applying those engineering skills in cardiology. I would see people that showed up in the hospital with heart attacks, and to me, heart attacks were caused by these tubes called coronary arteries that would develop blockages in them, and it would occlude the artery and cause death to the heart muscle, and sometimes people would die from these. But I saw them through the vision of a fluid mechanics engineer who saw tubes and blood flow. So there was physics involved in that blood flow. And Don Giddens, my great mentor to the right, another research mentor, who was chair of aerospace engineering, also had the crazy idea that the flow in the coronaries, very much like the flow in any tube system, were governed by the same physical principle called Reynolds number, the ratio of inertial to viscous forces. No matter if it's a small tube of 3 millimeters like your coronary arteries or 100 millimeters in diameter, that Reynolds number defined the flow characteristics of the flow in that coronary artery. So we had the idea that if you could find out where there were low velocity areas in branches, that could be where early plaques would settle and develop and grow. And in fact, we were right about that. If you look at what's in front of us, that's a flow rig, and there's a lesion, a model lesion of the left anterior descending artery with a stenosis in it. And we studied this using all types of laser Doppler studies. I'm not going to get into that, but we were able to clearly point out by looking at this and then pairing them up with coronary arteriograms to find where early lesions would develop in the coronary arteries. And it turned out Don and I did this work in the late 80s, and that research had borne fruit in terms of its guiding principles of how we understand where early atherosclerotic lesions develop and grow. So that was some seminal early work. I didn't stop there. I was involved in minority affairs work. So you have to look at all your talents. I was very keen about getting African-American kids in med school at Emory. So we started the Minority Affairs Office, Laura Mitchell and I, and we started working to admit African-American kids from Morehouse, Spelman, Lamb University, all over the South, Emory Medical School. And that's what I'm doing now at Vanderbilt. Next slide. So once again, back to my dad, the guiding force in my understanding of being a man, being a contributor to society. All of his writings as a journalist were then placed in the Emory Rare Books section. And there you have it. There it is. And you can go to Emory Library, Woodruff Library, and look for the Robert Churchwell manuscripts. I want to point out again, this is Dad's library here. Okay, look at that library. Look at all those books and the Harvard classics. He would say either you cut grass in the neighborhood to pay for college, André, or you read these books and write a report in my air-conditioned library for $300, and I'll give you the money without having to cut the grass. Well, you knew what choice I made. My goodness, his air-conditioned library was a hell of a lot easier. So reading all that stuff and then working and looking at what other skills and talents I had. Dad knew I could draw and sketch, and he challenged me to take the drawing and sketching to build these models of thinking of the heart, or ways to think about world problems from a more design point of view. What do I mean by that? So when I work, oftentimes I draw things out in a thought model. Well, this is one drawing. It's not a thought model, but it's me wearing a suit that I designed. That's a sketch and an ink sketch. And so I use the creativity side to stimulate my brain to solve the cardiology problems. I just finished this. I think you know who that is, don't you? This is a pencil and ink sketch of John F. Kennedy that I did just the other day. This will go on the wall of my office here at Vanderbilt. So I really want to make the case that it's really pivotal to listen to those other voices, those creative voices in your head that in fact will inform what you do during your day job. So look to the creative side of your brain. Go back to the slide before. So it's my crazy thinking that led me to believe that as we tried to educate students about how to make decisions, it occurred to me that you use the brain where the knowledge is, but your heart informs what you do. If it's your family, member, you're going to think harder and work harder, right, to solve that problem. So think of your patients like your family, and then all the experiences you've had, bad or good, your so-called gut feelings, will also inform decision making. So Steve Martin was wrong. You have 3 brains, not 2 brains, as he has in the drawing here. Next slide. And so using that design thinking, this is a model that I have created that I use to teach young physicians and young scientists who are working in cardiology how to think about guiding your thinking to solve problems. So I talked to you, look to the left of the diagram. I talked about the gut and the knowledge brain and the heart that help you stay connected to your parental teachings and humanism, and they'll guide you in making the right decisions because you'll care and you'll have knowledge in equal amounts. But there have to be other things that sustain a career of 20 or 30 years, right? Whether it be in science or medicine or some combined hybrid career. And so this is like a gain factor that engineers use. There are different gain factors that drive you in the course of your life to stay in the practice of medicine. Is it purely financial? I hope not. That'll be a weak gain, because that can't sustain 30 years of getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning to work on your research or take care of patients. It has to be things like the inner satisfaction of serving mankind. It has to be, go back to the other side. It has to be applying evidence-based medicine. It has to be the intellectual decision. It has to be the task management. Those are the kind of things that should sustain you. Next slide. And you have to then learn along the way how to partition making decisions, so you're not constantly overusing too much of your energy thinking everything's important. Not everything is urgent or important. You have to think about how to partition your energy and your decision-making process. Next slide. And you have to then decide, do you go to something quickly, or do you, meaning immediate service, or do you put problems in long-term parking to reflect on them more? So you have to have these thought models that I've used out of my engineering training to help me actually solve medical problems, administrative problems, and scientific problems. Next slide. So I end the story as I began. My father, guiding principle, life coach mentor, embedded in me the idea of the importance of the life of the mind and reaching into my creative self to then use that to then engage my right and left brain in ways that help me solve problems in very interesting and unique ways, using drawing, 3-dimensional models, and the like. This is Dad's school in Nashville, the Robert Churchwell Museum Magnet School, named after him. It's an interesting story. This school was actually named the Wharton School. It sits right in Black North Nashville, right down the street from Fisk University. And when it was put there in the 1930s, it was named after a Confederate general. How about that one? Well, someone got enough wisdom and guidance to take that name off the building, redesign the school, and name it after one of their cherished heroes of North Nashville, Robert Churchwell. So I hope this has been a helpful look. In that school, Dad's sayings are all over the place, and other people who he quoted. So young kids, elementary school kids, when they come in that building, they're going to be surrounded by the words of Robert Churchwell and those people who he valued, whether it be Tennyson or Shakespeare or the like. And that's Dad there. So open for questions if there's opportunity for questions there, Kermit, or certainly the audience and from the faculty here.
We're going to come back, Dr. Churchwell, for a wrap up of questions and answers. As we heard, thank you so very much. Normal people having a great time to change the world. Creativity and exploring. Thank you very much, Dr. Churchwell. We'll hear more from you in the question and answer section in just a few minutes. Dr. Melanie McReynolds is published extensively on biochemistry, molecular biology, cellular and energy metabolism. She represents Alcorn State, whose pre-professional programs is committed to preparing a career in law, medicine, pharmacy, dentistry, veterinary medicine, and for those who want to enroll in graduate schools with PhD programs in biological, chemical, physical, and biomedical sciences. Dr. McReynolds is the Hannah Gray Postdoctoral Fellow and Burroughs Wellcome Awardee at Princeton University. Dr. McReynolds also aims to establish an independent research group where her future lab will shed light on metabolic aging and disease. And you can find more information about Dr. McReynolds on page 32 of your digital program. Welcome, Dr. McReynolds.
Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you, Mr. Payne, for that wonderful introduction. And before I start, I really would like to thank the organizers of this amazing conference to empower Black students to pursue STEM, pursue the engineering, mathematics, and science careers, for giving me the opportunity to share my life story and my lived experiences with you all today. I've been motivated myself by the session before this one and the prior speaker. And I think that what I have to add will really bring everything together. I'm in a space where I can share, I've just made it to the other side. So where many of the students are right now, I was just there a couple of years ago. And so over the next 5 minutes or so, I kind of want to share how I made it over this last decade. So first, to just kind of give a general gist of who I am Melanie McReynolds. I'm originally from Mississippi. So I attended, as Mr. Payne mentioned in the introduction, Alcorn State University, where I majored in chemistry and physics. Ever since I was a child, I always had a love for chemistry, and math and science. However, I took every single science class in high school, but I was never really exposed to the laboratory experience. But I knew that it was something about being in the lab that I was very interested in pursuing. So when I went to undergrad at Alcorn State, I took advantage of the exposures that are given via the NIH and the NSF. There are so many internship mechanisms, and a lot of people talked about that already. But for my freshman year, every single opportunity that came before me, I took advantage of it to get more experience. And also, to go to medical school and various professional schools, people encourage internships, but internships really do give that foundation to what science and math and engineering, etc., all has to offer. So what exactly do I do? So I study I'm a scientist. I would say I'm a chemist trained biologist. My research centers around metabolism and aging. So aging is one of the strongest risk factors for for the majority of the prevalent diseases that impact our nation today. And we probably all have family members where we could see, as soon as we begin to age, we see that decline beginning to happen. There's a wise quote that states, age is a gift of art, is a work of art. However, I guess going through this week as well, I'm dealing with my mother. I've been back and forth to Mississippi and with her health. So this is really something that's personal for me right now. So to think about all of those metabolic diseases, heart disease, kidney failure, multiple myeloma, etc. If we really want to understand and solve these issues and really benefit the fruit of our labor when we age, we have to ask the questions that really matter the most to our communities. So that's where my passion comes from for being at the bench and being a scientist and transitioning into faculty positions. Going through this pipeline, I realized that there were not any faculty members who looked like me. So if you don't have people who really look like you doing this work, how can you really address the questions that matter to your community? So that's the reason why I do what I do. I care about my community, I care about my people, and I love science. I love the ability to be able to ask questions and answer in the investigation processes, and not just really being at the interface of chemistry and biology, where I use really cool sophisticated analytical tools to really address the biological, physiological outcomes. I also do a lot of work in diversity, equity, and inclusion. I learned that, we really can't depend on anyone else to tell our stories but ourselves, and we can use our own experiences to make it better for the next generation. So within the D&I world, I've started doing a lot of diversity writing, where I'm talking about the best ways to train to train undergraduate students, because I was just one of those students who went through the process. Or these are the things, pitfalls to avoid, or these are the things you should do. Every student is supposed to be mentored organically. Everyone has a specific way of being mentored. You cannot have a universal formula to mentor every student. So taking my own experiences, I've started doing that now, so the generation behind me can have a easier, we want to make the path easier. It's going to be hard work, but if I can do anything to help the people who will be training the next generation, that's what I'm trying to do. And I also believe that I have an ordained purpose to really shine my light and be a light barrier, and to motivate and encourage, and especially students who are pursuing this path, because this path is not easy, but it's so beneficial, especially if you have a love for what you do and a passion for what you do. So that's my purpose, because if I made it from rural Mississippi all the way to Princeton, anyone else can make it. So yeah, so before I end, I want to share 7 lessons of my. Before I go into that, I will mention the Hannah Gray Fellowship and the Burroughs Wellcome Fund Fellowship. So basically, from the work that I've done as an undergraduate and a graduate student, going into my postdoc, these private institutions have already invested over close to $2 million with me. So I have almost $2 million behind my name to pursue any science that I want to pursue as I go into faculty positions. And within the Howard Hughes Medical Institute in the Hannah Gray Fellows Program, I am the only HBCU representative, HBCU graduate who is represented as one of the Hannah Gray Fellows. But I know that because of the work I've done over these last years, they are going to be more interested in finding those students who have graduated from HBCU. So never doubt where you're from. And that goes into my first lesson from my lived experiences. We can never doubt what our faith knows. We have to believe in our purpose and know that a door is not going to open in front of us for no reason. We are not we are where we are at every single point in time for a reason. So if you got admitted to grad school, never doubt that you're not there because you deserve to be there. If you were admitted, if life brought you into grad school or into a professional program, you are meant to be in that space. So never doubt what you already know or what your faith knows. But with that, the second thing that I learned over this life, faith without work is dead. We can do all, we can believe and know that we're where we're supposed to be, but we have to do the work. So always believe in yourself and always back that work up. And to go into my third point, always allow the work you do to speak for you. Over the last 10 years of my life, I learned that the most, where I can talk all day, and sometimes people listen, sometimes not. But when you do the work, people have to acknowledge what you're doing and why you're sitting at the table. Fourthly, whenever you get the stage, always perform and take full advantage of every single opportunity. You never know who you're meeting. You never know who you're talking with. You never know who you're doing research with on these internship programs. Take advantage of every opportunity. Next, rejection is sometimes protection and redirection for what's meant. A delay is never a denial. So when you get rejected from something, it could be protection. Train your mind to look at these things in a positive light. Next, choose peace. Know how to find your peace. Peace is a state of being. And when you're able to find that peace that surpasses all understanding, any hardship, any difficulty, you will be able to overcome those things. And lastly, always remember that rest is a weapon. When you enter professional schools, graduate schools, and working towards your higher degrees, take a day to rest. When we are drained, when we are tired, that's when our guard comes down and things that we're not looking forward to happen will happen. So always remember, rest is a weapon. And thank you all again for allowing me to share my lived experiences, and I look forward to addressing any questions.
Thank you very much, Dr. McReynolds. I'd like to bring Dr. Churchwell and Dr. Juarez on the screen for our question and answer. And I'd like to go back to you, Dr. McReynolds. How did your academic training in biochemistry and microbiology and molecular biology lead you to your interest in metabolic decline and aging?
That's a really good question. So I would say I always had a love for chemistry and math. So my foundation is in chemistry, but I realized that it was those biological questions that intrigued me the most, or understanding disease. So my educational background in undergrad was per chemistry, but all of the internships I did were more biomedical related. So when I did my master's within the Alcorn State, Penn State, the Bridges to the Doctorate program, I did a master's in biology because I never really had a biology course. I was straight chemistry and physics to catch up on all of the biology and to to tie those loose ends. But I felt like the BMEB program at Penn State, the biochemistry, molecular biology, and microbiology was the most comprehensive, where my chemical background would be appreciated, and I could learn how to think and maneuver like a biologist. And so now I'm able to use these sophisticated chemical tools and address these biological questions. So I have a really, really interesting niche at a critical time in history where not that many people have this skill set. So, I mean, I think I look at it as destiny. 15 years ago when I was majoring in chemistry and beginning this, I knew I would be here, but I didn't see that I would be here. But I'm happy that I had that background and training.
I think you mentioned some of the areas that Dr. Hentz and others that have talked about. Sometimes you have to encourage yourself. And if you look around and there's no one there who looks like you, remember that you're there. Dr. Churchwell, your concerns around minorities and women in engineering, and can you just speak to us very briefly about your pre-health pathway in the medicine and the Black Male Initiative? Tell us something about that program.
Yeah, so, well, there are a couple of things going on. You know, if you talk about my path was knowing to look at your strengths, or math and science were my strengths. So that's why I went down but I was looking at it to apply towards healthcare kind of in a more direct way than just purely becoming a PhD in biomedical engineering. So that led me down the healthcare path. Look at your strengths. I'm a very personable person. I'm really connected, wanting to get to know people in a more personal way. So that connects the engineering, medicine, and the interest to be kind of much more in the care delivery side. Mm-hmm. Now, the other part that we're involved, I thought you were referring to the National Academy of Sciences is involved in building a program currently called looking at Black men and women in STEM, and the recognition of all of us that are in the roundtable up there in the National Academy, recognizing there's a stagnating number of women, but falling number of African-American men that are in STEM, whether it be science, engineering, technology, medicine, or the like. And so there's been a fairly aggressive approach, thank goodness, by the National Academy to bring a bunch of us thought leaders together, and scientists and engineers, to look at ways to address it. And so a number of action groups are in play around racism, its role, about looking at education, as the doctor here talked about, and a host of other topics are being looked at and addressed, and books are being written and white papers that hopefully people can apply. Thank you for that.
Dr. Horton mentioned earlier, and I want to be sure that we mention this. We're at September the 17th. Things are very different September the 17th than they were March the 17th. And Dr. Horton, thank you for reminding us that we need to put our compassion hat back on, because we never know what other people are going through. So just we remind ourselves, each other, about the human characteristic. Dr. Matthews Juarez, did you have any questions of Dr. Churchwell or Dr. McReynolds?
I do. Dr. Churchwell and I have come to know each other really, really well, really, really fast. And I just love the way in which he has put in perspective. It doesn't matter where you come from, and Dr. McReynolds says it too. It's where you have purpose and where you're going. The other thing that I would have Dr. Churchwell talk about is how he has used art to focus his medicine and his engineering, and focus his love for himself, to give some self-protection as he went through these difficult, strenuous paces that you could see from the moment probably that he was born and to where he is now. He hasn't slowed down. And so if he could speak to how we must do self-care, how we use art, how we use the things that are important as we take our journey towards this tremendous work. And then I'll come back to Dr. McReynolds.
Absolutely, Dr. Juarez. You know, so art allows a number of things for me. It is an escape. If you were in my office, you would see that I have a sketchbook always at hand. And so the sketchbook, I didn't do any sketching while you were talking, Dr. McReynolds. I was paying attention to you. But when I have a real boring speaker, I had to create a very finished drawing, you can imagine. I didn't have any drawings going on. I was riveted by her comments there. But in that sketchbook, I try to follow Leonardo da Vinci. Right next to that drawing might be some ideas on my next talk. Like the points I wanted to make here, you'd see next to the drawing, maybe 3 or 4 things I wanted to put in bullet points. And the next page might be a project I'm working on to try to advance the work we're doing in the National Academy of Sciences. You flip the page, there's a drawing maybe of Superman lifting the world or something. So I intertwine these things because first off, there is that rest that Dr. McReynolds, I find transiently in a few minutes, my brain is someplace else. It's someplace in the Marvel universe maybe, or it's someplace in Italy, or it's someplace maybe in the Vatican as I remember something I saw and I'm sketching. And then when I come back, there is amazing, just in that moment, there is a certain refreshing aspect of that allows me to come back into the moment in the reality and have a new thought or a different thought. So I really recommend finding those things that are in your creative space. Everyone has it. Or finding something that actually juices your creative space. Maybe jogging. Maybe it's weightlifting. Maybe it's listening to Marvin Gaye at 11 o'clock at night. Whatever that might turn out to be, it's really important as part of our life journeys to find those things that bring us peace, that give us moments of grace, moments of rest, but also can inform what I call your day job too.
Yeah, that's an excellent segue. I think that what is exciting about this session is the issue of heart, the issue of compassion. And I think that for the African American journey, the idea of spirituality is very important, which is what Dr. McReynolds introduced. And she took her daily life and she used a process of spirituality to take us through what she came to. And for the connection between you, Dr. Churchwell, and Dr. McReynolds is so slender that it's paper thin, you can see through it. And so both of you speak to our hearts and speak to what we talked about in the last session, which is compassion, nurturing, caring. One doesn't get what one is going unless they have someone who cares about them, whether it's someone who starts out as your mentor, who is your mom or your dad, or someone who is much more different than you would ever imagine. So Dr. McReynolds, as you sit here talking to us, how would you say to someone who is a student at an HBCU, living in Mississippi or Tennessee, and not great circumstances, but circumstances that are challenging? You may have a baby, you may have fathered a baby, but your dreams are to become an engineer, to be a doctor, to be a combination of both. What would you say that person should do?
I would first say that not to be afraid to just step out on faith and chase what they desire to do. Don't let anything hold them back. And nothing will ever be too hard that they won't be able to carry. And someone mentioned in the first session how it takes a village. So a lot of times in graduate and professional communities, there is a group of graduate students, a group of medical students, dentistry students, who all come together, study together, have families together, etc. So even if you have, say, children, responsibilities, you will find that support there. So I would, my advice would be, don't allow the current circumstances to stop you from what you want to pursue, and just to go out and step out on faith and do that.
We have
Excellent.
6 minutes left in this session. And if we could, Dr. Matthews Juarez, this was a question just leading into something you spoke to Dr. McReynolds about. And that was, would you advocate students to attend an HBCU to undergrad to obtain their undergraduate degrees in STEM and engineering over schools like Georgia Tech, Clemson, University of Tennessee? And do you believe that that gave you an edge over other candidates who were applying for your fellowships?
That's a really good
That's
question.
a question. Good question.
So I'm one of the, I do not participate in the PWI versus HBCU debate. I believe for each student, you have to go where it's best for you. But I would say, I think it's a great advantage to go to a HBCU, because in my experiences, when these institutions are looking to recruit students, they go to the HBCUs to recruit students for various internship programs, graduate school programs. They're making those connections, etc. And but you want to make sure you go to the best school for the program. You don't want to go to a school that's not going to give you the rigor education and think you're going to make it far. You want to go to the best place that's going to give you that curriculum, or that even when you go, you take advantage of what they're offering. And even for the students who want to pursue, who go to PWIs, I believe they do just as well too. But in my experience, I've seen that a lot of the students who really, I don't want to say that. I've seen students from both PWIs and HBCUs do tremendously well. And I really do think it's just that personal touch you have. They love to call it grit. I just think that's just who we are, but that's the quote unquote word that is used for it. Sometimes I think when you go to a HBCU, you understand how to maneuver so many interesting landscapes. So when you get to a PWI, nothing bothers you because you done went through so much before, etc. But I have friends that went to both, and people do well on each side of things. It's really about what you do wherever you go. So I don't know if that answered the question. But
Yes, we have 2 minutes left in the session. And we want to toss this to, and we have one question in the chat room, Dr. Churchwell, but we're going to try to phrase it so that you can answer that. In one of your YouTube videos, you discussed the importance of character.
Yes.
Would you please elaborate on that?
Yes. It's interesting. We're as being Vice Chancellor of Equity, Diversity, Inclusion at Vanderbilt and in a PWI, we're seeing, and whether it be HBCU or others, we're seeing kids coming back to campus, and you see these pictures of folks partying and so forth, and they're acting like it's 1999, literally the old song, and not having any understanding or reaction or responding to the current climate, the climate of COVID and this highly infectious virus. And so it dawned on me that maybe what they need is to go through a process of a character analysis or character filter. The kind of thing my dad put me through. He said, when you step out of this house, you probably heard the same story here, Doc and Dr. McReynolds, you're representing me when you leave this house. So I want you to use temperance, courage, wisdom, reverence, okay? And build a character around emotionally intelligent, important things like self-awareness and empathy. Now, I'll just tell you, there are not many parents like Robert Churchwell and Mary Churchwell, or like Dr. McReynolds' parents, that imbue that, embed that, inculcate that into you so that when you walk out of the house, you do recognize that there's a COVID pandemic and you act responsibly. And so that was what that was about. And, Benjamin E. Mays is my best example. You go to Morehouse College in the 1940s, 50s, 60s, and you had this amazing gentleman who molded these young men into the great into the great leaders that they are. But it was all about character. It was not about him teaching science and math. It was about trying to convey the kind of character traits that Morehouse men or great leaders should have.
And Dr. Churchwell, that was the other question in the chat room that we didn't get a chance to ask you, was about reading in your father's library, but I think you answered it in the answer to that question. We have about 30 seconds. Dr. Matthews Juarez, is there, you'd like to have something in these last 30 seconds before we go
Yes.
to the session?
Thank you, Mr. Payne. I would like to announce that in March, Dr. Churchwell will be spearheading a group called Black Men in White Coats. And this is an initiative to encourage Black young men to go into the sciences and into medicine. And more will be coming out on that from Dr. Churchwell. I just wanted to give him a nod because he is organizing that.
Well, to our attendees, please stay tuned for General Session 3, our roundtable discussion on the value proposition of engineering-focused programs and curriculum. I'm Kermit Payne, and thank you very much for joining us.